Today we are going to be learning about how to take Cornell notes. Some of you might be more familiar than others on how to do this. And just questions I want you to think about before we begin is, how did you learn how to take notes? Think about a teacher or a class where you learned. Maybe some of you haven't learned. And then think about how the skill of note taking is going to help you in school and your academic success. All right, so in terms of why take notes, research has shown that you're much more likely to remember something if you write it down. So it's going to help you remember what is taught. It's going to help you prepare for your tests. It's going to help you be able to complete the study guide to prepare for the test. And then this format of note taking is actually going to foster critical thinking skills. More reasons on why to take notes. It can help you organize information and process that information. And like I said, it's going to help you recall the information. And it's especially going to help you remember the information long term if you take time to review notes after class. So, in other words, taking notes, writing down information is a great way for you to learn information. In terms of the history of Cornell notes, as you might imagine, it was developed at Cornell University, and the person, Walter Pauck, that developed it wanted his students to use the notes as a study guide, and Cornell notes are commonly used in law school. So this is what the format is going to look like. I'm going to give you a template. So the first thing that you're going to write is your first and last name, the name of the class, the period, the date. Then over on the then on the right hand side, we'll have, this is where you'll take your class notes, and I'll go over a little bit on how to take notes. And then in the left, this is going to be where you write your questions about the material, or if you'd like, you can keep your headings over on the left as well. If there's any kind of diagram, you can put that over here on the left. And then at the very end of the notes, not at the end of the page, but at the end of the notes for that day, you're going to write a 3 to 4 sentence summary of what you learned that day from the lesson. All right, so here is an example about why take Cornell notes. So you can read through the information that they've written about Cornell notes, and then you'll notice on the left-hand side, they have their questions. So how can Cornell notes help me organize? Which side do I put my diagrams on? Why should I use concept maps? What are the benefits of using Cornell notes? So you can take a moment to read over that, pause, and see what that looks like. There's going to be other examples in the lesson as well. So the summary, like I said, is going to be at the end of the lesson, and it's written after you've taken your notes, after you've done your questions, and like it says, the summary should answer the problem stated in the subject. So for example, if the subject was problems in research, then you would write a summary in which you discuss the problems in research that were discussed in the lesson. In terms of how to take your notes, there are a variety of ways, and we'll go over these more in detail. But there's an outline format, so where you use bullet points or you use ABC or 1, 2, 3. Narrative is more like you're writing a story, it's one big paragraph. You decide on your own symbols, maybe you want to use stars or triangles or squares. And then the biggest thing is abbreviations in any style of note taking that you use. In terms of what do I put in my questions, what kind of questions am I using? The questions should reflect any information that you don't understand. So you write down a concept and you don't know what it means. Write that in the question section. It can also lead to questions that you want to discuss with your teacher. So for example, let's say we are talking about color blindness, and that brings to mind dogs, and color blindness is a common question that I get. So you could write, are dogs really colorblind? So it could just be something that you want to further your knowledge. And you could also put in the left maybe potential essay questions or test questions that you think might be asked of the material. And then gaps in your notes. Maybe you didn't understand how information connected. Maybe you feel like you don't have prior knowledge on that. You could write that type of question as well. So again, what goes where? Here's the notes, your questions, your summaries at the bottom, your heading at the top. All right, so here's an example of some biology notes. So on the left, you can see that they wrote their vocabulary terms on the left, and then in the right, they wrote the corresponding definitions. You can see in terms of they did a little bit of diagramming, they used some bullet points, and then here we can read their summary. Notice that it's just the very big ideas, and it's written in their own words. So again, you can pause that and read that over. Next, we have physics notes in college. So again, over on the right, we see that they used 1 and 2 to help organize. We see some diagrams, we see some formulas, and then over on the right, they included what look like headings for the information. And here in this particular example, we don't see a summary, but we're assuming that they have one. All right, so here is the summary of those notes. Again, you can read that. This is a little longer than the requirement. The requirement is 3 to 4 sentences, so brief, but still covering the main ideas of the lesson. Again, you can take time to pause and read this over. All right, some tips on taking notes. In terms of how I organize my notes, the heading on the slide is going to be what you should first write down on your paper. That wouldn't usually be in the form of a question or reasons for the fall of Rome. It tells you right where the direction that that slide is headed. And so you want to write down the headings, the key terms to help you organize. And so recommend you skip lines. You decide on what system works best for you. Do you want to number? Do you want to use letters? Do you want to use symbols? And something that's really important that a lot of Pine Lake students do wrong is you need to make sure you only take down the important ideas. Some people are tempted to try to write every single word on a slide, and what you'll find is that maybe your high school teachers will slow down and let you do that, but in college, they're going to fly through and you'll never ever get everything down, and it's just very inefficient. So make sure when you're taking notes, you're just writing down the main ideas. On the other hand, you also have to make sure that you do include sufficient detail. Otherwise, you'll find that if your notes are too brief, you won't be able to recall what you meant when you look back. So make sure you do include enough detail to where you can look back and understand. The next thing that goes right along with the brief, summarize things in your own words. I recommend that you write down word for word when you're copying a definition, but otherwise you should summarize in your own words. Next, you can include pictures in your notes if it's helpful. A diagram, some of you might think in pictures, so maybe putting a picture out beside a definition to help you recall. It's up to you. I also recommend that you use abbreviations. That's going to allow you extra writing time as well as extra listening time. Some common abbreviations that I use, for example, I write EX. For definition, I write DEF. In terms of history, government, I abbreviate GOV apostrophe T. The more you write notes, you'll start to realize things that you can abbreviate. Those are just a couple examples. All right, so here is an example of computerized notes. So we see the headings that they use are going to be the PowerPoint slides. So again, that's what I recommend for my lectures. They've left lots of room for questions and diagrams, and you can see that they use numbers and letters to organize their notes. All right, here's an example of that abbreviation that I was talking about. So in this example, it says Hippocrates, a Greek who is considered to be the father of modern medicine, was born on the island of Cosmos in 460 BC. I would even abbreviate this further, but they write Hippocrates in parentheses GR for Greek, father of medicine, and then they write the date. I would even abbreviate this further and write Hippocrates equals father of med. In terms of reflecting on the notes, again, that's going to help you remember it long term. So check over your notes, fill in anything that's incomplete, make sure that your notes are not too brief, highlight, underline, circle with keywords, phrases. Also, write out to the left things that are going to help you recall it. Maybe it's a funny way to help you remember a vocab term or a picture that's going to help you remember it. And then in terms of how you can study from these notes, you can cover the right side and answer the questions that you had on the left. You can quiz yourself out loud. You can cover the right side and write out the answers. You can rewrite your summaries or just read over your summaries. You could maybe go so far as writing a quiz that you think of possible questions that might be asked on the notes. So those are just some tips. And like I said, we're going to go over this further in class in terms of the styles of notes. So if you have any questions, please let me know. But this is going to be a useful tool that you can carry with you into college and beyond. The last thing that I want to say is, again, to reinforce how important it is to look over your notes frequently, not just a couple days before the test as you're filling out your study guide, but each night reviewing them just to keep that information fresh in your mind. And the more you look over it, the more you practice it, the more likely you'll remember it later.